God, I love Zinogre and Nargacuga. But what about small monsters? Zinogi and Nargikugi? Those are just the babies of large monsters. I mean real small monsters. Ants? No, what? No! Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, the Monster Hunter series as a whole is chock full of monsters of all kinds, different shapes, sizes, habitats, diets, any type of distinction that you want to make. But today I'm here to talk about a very specific type of monster that is simply underappreciated, the small monsters. These little guys make a massive amount of difference in the feeling of the games as a whole. They may not be the targets of your average hunts, even though there are some exceptions to that of course, but they are a part of every single one of your hunts. They add personality to the various maps by inhabiting them, and sometimes they enhance the existence of a large monster as well. More than anything, they're like side characters, you know? Even when you aren't focusing on them, they are there. Even when you aren't actively thinking about them, they are still enhancing the experience, for the most part. As the guild's officially recognized small game hunter myself, I thought that put me in a pretty good position myself to create what I will simply call the official small monster tier list, ranking all of the small monsters in the main series with the exception of things like Gadjalaka, as I always found it sort of weird that some people call them small monsters. They aren't small monsters, they're small people. And also the one literally called fish. It's just various species of fish. It's fish. Moving on then, let's begin the tier list properly, and we'll be moving today in alphabetical order just to spice things up. Without further ado then, we have Eltaroth in the B tier. Generally, I don't find myself being a big fan of the sort of insecty small monsters, but Eltaroth are sort of the exception among them. They get variously glowing sacks depending on what they eat, which is a neat touch, and I just think that they look great. After that is Anteka in the D tier. The D tier is for small monsters that are okay, I guess, but I just don't think the games would really be worse without them. Anteka aren't all that inventive to me. They're just deer, really, that's it. After that comes Apsaros up in the A tier. They're like a mix between cows and turtles, and I love that, and their little defensive circle formation they do when they're in danger is pretty cool too. Then we have Aptonoth in the S tier. If Rathalos is the flagship large monster of the series as a whole, Aptonoth are the flagship small monster. They've been in every game except for one. I'm looking at you, Rise and Sunbreak, and they're always one of the first things that you see, just sort of hanging around being big dinosaur cows, and I think that's great.
I'm not a cow!
Then we have the Baggy in our C tier. They're alright. Generally, I don't rank the raptors too highly, as most of them are pretty plain to me. I like Baggy's crest, but they're still just quite basic. The C tier in general is for monsters that I think do enhance the series to have around, but I don't really care for them much myself. After that is Barnos in the D tier, and the Winged Drakes have just really never caught my attention aside from a couple. They're mostly very bland to me. They're important to have conceptually, I understand that, but I'm just not a fan of them personally. Next up, Blango joining the ranks of the C tier. One of the only two monkey small monsters, they're not that bad at all, I just don't view them as an essential part of the Monster Hunter experience, nor do I particularly like them more than the others in the lower tiers. Following that is Bahabra, whose name I could never actually pronounce correctly, in the D tier. They're okay, flying insects are nice as a concept, but I just don't find them very interesting as a specific species. Then comes the Boggy up in the A tier, the new raptor from Sunbreak, and it just looks fantastic. I'm pretty sad that this is the only raptor so far without a drome, as they're pretty gnarly looking little goblin dudes, and I love their coloring too, just a really solid raptor, one I think truly deserves to be in these games. After that is Bombadgy, our first S+ tier, and if you didn't expect this, you're crazy. They're big old badger dudes clearly inspired by Tanuki with massive air sacs inside of them. They look big and chunky until you hit them, at which point they pop and explode and fire off like a rocket in the direction you hit them, which is just incredible, and then they shrink down too. They have functionality, interesting biology, and they look great. A perfect example of an S+ small monster. Next up is Bullfango, our first F tier. Look, there's just nothing redeeming about them, okay? They are super basic looking monsters, they're literally just boars. They're incredibly annoying to be near on hunts, with no exceptions, and they're in the F tier because they genuinely make me enjoy the experience of hunting less when they are a part of it. Following that, we have Cenator in the S tier. Crabs are great. I love crabs. Having crab monsters is fantastic, and the Cenator are the slightly more interesting crab species in the games, so their small monster clearly deserves a nice hefty high tier spot. Then we have Cephalos down in the F tier. They are visually quite weird, like someone took a hammerhead shark and just beat it with a mallet until it was nearly flat, and then like Bullfango on a hunt, they're just super annoying, diving in and out of the sand just to take a nibble at you. After that we have Conga up in the A tier, the other monkey small monster, and I just like their shape and their color. I think they're visually interesting, and being one of the only monkey small monsters makes them quite unique as well. Next up comes Kortos in the B tier. These are my favorite favorite of the winged drakes. I just think they look cool, like little flying snakes with legs, nothing overly complex here, just a visual preference. Following that is the Delex in the D tier. I think they're more visually interesting than Cephalos by a fair margin, but mechanically they act very similar, so they still do annoy me quite a fair bit. Then comes Epioth in the C tier. I'm very neutral on Epioth. I understand that they were important to have in the 3rd generation as just a generic underwater small monster. They don't upset me in any way, but they aren't overly visually intriguing to me either. They're just sort of there. After that, we have Gajau in the C tier as well. I do sort of like the way these guys look, being big, chunky catfish, but they're pretty aggressive, and being slapped by a catfish from off the screen isn't the most enjoyable experience. Next up is Gargua in the S+ tier. I mean, come on, they're basically spheres with legs and a long neck into a head. They make funny noises, they shoot out eggs when they're surprised. What is not to love about Gargua? They are a near perfect small monster in my opinion. Following that comes Gastodon, which I put in the S tier. I do like the shape of the sort of tiny brute wyvern, and something about their luscious mane of hair just really gets me. This is an entirely visual choice, I just think they look really good. Then we have the Genprey in the S+ tier. This is because of the Genprey quartet in older games. No other reason at all, I just love that they group up together and sing at you because why the hell not?
Country roads take me home.
After that comes Geoprey in the D tier. I think they're the least important raptor by a mile. They're literally just off-color Velociprey. They don't look notably visually different, and I don't think the series would be worse without them. Next up are the Little Gigi in the A tier. They are terrifying, but in a sort of endearing way, and they're incredibly unique too. Following that, we have the Juros in the B tier. I like the way they look, incredibly cobra-like lizards, but they lose a couple of points from being annoying to have around due to, well, the paralysis they would constantly inflict. Then comes Gown Goat in the S tier. They're just massive, chunky, fluffy goats. They don't do anything special, they aren't aggressive, I just think they both look cool and are unique, so they deserve a solid spot. After that is the Hermitar in the A tier. Crabs are great, Hermitar are great, I just like Ceanataur a little bit more, so these go 1 tier below those. Next up are the Hornitar in the C tier. These are sort of neat. They can be a little bit annoying on hunts, but not too bad, and they're visually a bit interesting just being big beetle dudes. Following that, we have the Iaprey in the D tier. They're just sort of raptors. Again, not overly interesting, and not only do I find their face shape a little bit off-putting, but they are poison raptors, and there are simply better poison raptors in this series anyways. Then comes a Zuchi in the B tier. They're pretty neat looking, I like their pack mentality, and they have an interesting attack pattern focusing on their tail, which is more than most small monsters actually get. After that are the Jaggy in the C tier, pretty basic raptors, but the frills they have are nice. And then we also have the Jagia, but up in the B tier, just because I like the way they look a little bit better, being a little bit chunkier and a little bit floppier. Next up comes the Jagras in the A tier. They look great, they work together in an interesting way, they scurry away if they're in danger. I just really like them both from an aesthetic and mechanical standpoint. Following that, we have the Kelby up in the S+ tier. Realistically, they're just more deer, but the community has created this incredible story of the immortality of the Kelby, and they are just an iconic part of the Monster Hunter series at this point. I cannot possibly imagine a world without them in it, because they can't die, so they'll always be here. Then we have the Kestodon in the C tier. They aren't bad, they aren't great, some people definitely like them more than I do, but I'm pretty indifferent on them. After that are the Conchu up in the S tier. They look really neat, they're super unique as far as small monsters go, and they can even attach themselves to large monsters to give them a little bit of armored shell, which reminds me a bit of Darth Bane in Star Wars lore and his lightsaber-proof bug armor that ate away at him slowly. And look, okay, I'm getting a little bit nerdy here. They're cool, they have interesting mechanics, and they remind me of something I really like, okay? Next up is the Laranoth up in the S+ tier, and how could they not be? They are the biggest small monster in any of the games. They look silly with the weird lump on their heads, and I just love everything about them from the ground up, which is quite a lot to love because, again, they are massive. Following that come the Ludroth in the B tier. These are cool looking and unique in their own way, not overly special, but they are important to the existence of Royal Ludroth. Then we have the Macau up in the A tier. Super solid raptor, looks really neat and different even though it's the same shape, and has a unique fighting style compared to the other little raptors as well. After that is the Mernos in the D tier. Again, I just don't think that they are that interesting. The winged drakes have never really been my favorite kind of small monster. Next up comes comes the moss wine in the S tier. Yes, it's a pig, but it's a pig with the Pachycephalosaurus head covered in moss, and it just goes around eating mushrooms, and I do love that. It's just its own quaint little thing that exists, and it just happens to be wandering around the maps doing whatever it wants. Following that is the Noios in the D tier. Again, winged drakes just don't really do it for me, and I don't think that these are visually more interesting either. Then comes the Popo in the S tier. They're giant, they're furry, they're helpless vessels for sustenance of larger monsters, and I just like the way that they look and act. As simple as that. After that, we have the Pyrantula in the S tier. I love these little spider small monsters, and these ones are pretty cool, but not quite as cool as the next entry, which is Rachnoid in the S plus tier. I think Pyrantula looks a little bit cooler than they do, but Rachnoids being able to shoot out webbing as a small monster is super unique, and I love stuff like that. Next up is the Raphanos in the D tier. Another pretty flavorless winged drake that doesn't look all that appealing to me. That simple. Following that, we have the Remobra in the C tier, which gets to go up a tier from most winged drakes because I like the way they look a little bit better, and the lore of them hanging around in areas where Elder Dragons will later on be is pretty neat too. Then we have the Renoplos. They're just big armored dinosaurs, nothing overly unique or special about them visually or mechanically. Not bad, not great, I'm pretty indifferent on them, and that's why they're in the C tier. Then we have the Shamos in the A tier. I think these Shamos are incredibly visually cool. I love their eyes and their general shape, and they make a silly sound too. Next up then we have Slagtoth in the S plus tier. I just love the way that they look, like a dinosaur fused with a bulldog. So much floppiness, so much chunkiness, so much just trying to exist in a world that exists. To kill them and eat them, they're just doing the best that they can, you know? Following that is the Erector in the B tier. They look visually interesting, they dig around, they're neat, just not one of my personal favorites. Then we have the Velociprey in the C tier. They are the first raptor to exist in the series, which gives them a bit of an interesting status, but looking back at them now in the modern age, I just don't find them overly cool by any means. After that, we have the Vespoid rounding off our F tier. Look, they're just wasps. They're wasps that fly around paralyzing you. They are hard to hit, they move erratically, they don't look interesting or special, and even if you do kill them, chances are you won't be able to carve them unless you use poison smoke bombs, which is just super aggravating if you actually want Vespoid materials. Next up is our final raptor, the Roggy in the B tier. I just like the way that they look with their weird little throat sacs and their vibrant orange bodies and their pig noses. They're fun, they're interesting looking for a raptor, and I have nothing really against them. Then we come to our final two for the day, the first of which is the Wolg in S+. They just look lovely, visually speaking, like a mix between a wolf and a badger, such luscious fur, and they can coil around you for a mechanically unique attack, which is pretty neat too. Finally then in the S+ tier, of course, are the Zamites. Not only do they grow into one of my favorite large monsters of all time, but their small monster form is incredibly cool in its own right. They look really cute, and they have a cool mechanic where they can just latch onto you, sucking your blood out of you, and growing up into a mid-sized Zamite as they just slowly go at you unless you roll them off of your body, and I just think that's really cool. And that's it for the list today, everyone. Every main series small monster ranked by the small game hunter himself. Myself? Me. It's me. I love the small monsters. I think they're incredibly important to our experience in these games, even if you don't realize it all of the time. I hope you've enjoyed this list, and of course let me know if you disagree with any of my choices in the comments down below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.